So I realized that I was introducing earlier sessions and didn't introduce myself first, so sorry about that. So my name is Aaron Edwards. I'm the CEO and co-founder at KiraGen Bio. We use multiplex editing combinations to enable CAR T cells or other cell therapies to overcome the immunosuppressive tumor microenvironment, or in metaphorical terms, we like to give our cells noise cancellation headphones to enable them to ignore those suppressive signals. Spent some time early in my career, a couple years at Bluebird Bio, so got to see the first wave of CAR T go in the clinic, and then what led biology for Beam Therapeutics' first CAR T to go into the clinic for T-cell leukemias before I went back to school to start KiraGen. Really excited. I'll let the other two panelists make an introduction as well, but really exciting to see AI finally start touching cell and gene therapies more than just sort of small molecule or biologics discovery. So let the other two panelists make an intro and we'll take it off from there.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, first of all, thanks to everyone who's still here. I know it's kind of end of the day, but hopefully AI is a fun enough topic that we can keep it engaging, and hopefully we can help demystify the topic a little bit. So by way of introduction, my name is Dipen Sangurdekar. I'm the VP and Head of Data Science and AI at KSK Therapeutics. We are a clinical stage cell therapy company, and our platform is gene editing. So like Aaron's company here, we also have found gene targets, knockout targets in T cells that we think potentiate the cells and help them fight the tumor microenvironment. So hopefully we'll be able to validate the concept and raise all boats for this approach, because I really believe in it. Prior to KSQ, I also worked at Bluebird Bio, both on the sickle program and ABECMA, so spanning gene therapy and cell therapy, and applying machine learning to accelerate drug development.
And yeah, for my piece, I'm Kalen, and I'm co-founder and CTO of Ptolemy Bio, which is a startup in CGT. And we essentially have built a platform to take kind of raw experimental data and be able to turn that into a structured understanding of all the experiments that have been done, to provide reliable analysis and cross-experimental insights to be able to kind of inform the next experiment essentially in the same day. So I think for my background, I'm kind of a bit of an outsider to CGT normally, but I have a background in physics and software engineering for quite a while. And so I've kind of built these machine learning systems before it was a big thing, I imagine, much like Dipen, and have kind of taken these agentic systems as well, and these kind of this new age of agent-based systems to kind of bring outcomes. And I've done bioprocess optimization in cultured meat, where we've applied these quite successfully, and obviously at Ptolemy, this is what we intend to do for cell therapies.
Great. So to set the stage, I really loathe panels that are aggressive in terminology but don't give you anything to take away. And so I've encouraged everyone up here to reduce the jargon as much as possible and actually give you applications that you, wherever you are in your journey with AI, can hopefully leave today and start it or continue your journey. And so I think there are three things really of categories of AI that I like to state from the get-go. There's sort of the AI that predicts different things. I'm not going to give you examples yet, but ML or predictive analytics. The AI that generates things, so generative AI, and then AI that acts. So when you hear agentic AI, it's AI that does stuff, for your complex tasks. So maybe to start this conversation around, can you both provide an example of where you both are using AI today for your workflows, whether they are cell and gene therapy specific, or whether they're sort of general tools that are helping your day-to-day lives?
I think I can start off with kind of the more general. Obviously, being a kind of small-scale startup, we are as AI native as it comes by necessity, because when you're working with such a small team and you need to wear all of these hats of kind of executive, engineer, regulator, legal, there's actually not enough time in the day to service all of these functions appropriately. And so being able to kind of call on ChatGPT or other things to quickly understand something that you know nothing about is invaluable. And it's meant that we can operate as if we had 20 people on the team when we only had two to three, for instance. I think on the other side of this, we have a very large engineering contingent in terms of output, not personnel. And the only way this is possible is because we can now leverage these transcription tools that you would have heard about and all of these kind of agent things that are now coming up into vogue, which are actually extremely powerful because it allows you to get rid of all of the busy work of, we had 10 meetings on this topic, and instead of having to trawl through them all, you can literally ask one system, one question, please bring me all context related to this one decision, and then be able to execute that, whether it's building a feature, validating it, and deploying it to customers, literally on the order of days, as we've found.
So to build on to a word that you use, leverage, I love that word because I feel like my job is to find leverage where data and AI, right, can really make a difference. So my job is to go around the company, go around R&D, and find those fulcrum points where leveraging data and AI, a little bit of AI, can really help accelerate drug development. So broadly, right, I won't touch on the productivity tools. I think you described them very nicely. But in terms of cell therapy R&D specifically, there are 3 categories in which we are sort of leveraging AI. One is product design, right? So identifying the right targets or whether it's the right binder for a CAR T product, right? Leveraging protein language models or structure prediction models and sort of augmenting binder discovery screens to find the binders quickly, right? The second is product characterization. So as has been described elsewhere today, that cell therapies, especially autologous cell therapies and also allo to an extent are living products, right? So they are not homogeneous. Even for allogenic, from batch to batch, there is variation. And we know for a fact, and we have established that there are certain attributes of those products that are beneficial, whether it's markers of proliferation or markers of less differentiation, right? Or markers of exhaustion, conversely, that can lead for the products to fail. So we need to leverage AI, and we do, right, and machine learning to identify those markers in our cell therapy products, doing deep characterization, such as single cell omics and so on. Now, what do we do with that, right? Once we've characterized the products, we can actually translate it forward so that we can see which of those markers are actually correlates of clinical efficacy, right? And therefore, we want that to be like a CQA, right, that we want to control for. But also, right, working backwards, we want to see which patient baseline characteristics actually determine the fate of the cell therapy product, especially in an autologous setting, right? So whether it's apheresis for CAR T or whether it's the actual tumor microenvironment and harvest for TIL therapies. And then we need to sort of translate that into patient stratification criteria or inclusion criteria. And the third is clinical translation, right? So leveraging AI for mining large clinical genomics data sets, whether they're public or private, finding biomarkers or signatures or patterns that we think will increase our chances of probability of success in the clinic for the mechanism of action, right, that we have. So translating MOA to the clinic, that's something that AI we can lever for. That's sort of broadly the 3 categories. Of course, there are many, many different examples and nuances that we can go into, but that's what I generally think about.
Great. And I think these next wave of questions is really what do we need to do for AI to start to work in these current workflows for cell and gene therapy? And I think there's a lot of discussion around data. And I will throw the jargon out there intentionally because people usually don't dive deeper beyond garbage in, garbage out. Like, what does that mean? There are camps that like big data, where they are sort of data maximalists. And then there are camps that are sort of on the other side that are a bit more about the quality of data and not necessarily the scale of data. And so I have encouraged people, throughout these questions to encourage debate. So there is not one right answer, and there are definitely different camps for how your philosophies land. But what are your opinions on big data versus smaller data, or somewhere in between?
I've got many, but Dipen, please.
So I know you'll have a much more thought-out response to this, but when I started in this data business many years ago, I was more of a maximalist, right? Let's capture everything, verified source. We never know what's going to be more important. Let's boil the ocean. Over time, right, and especially having spent a lot of time in smaller companies where we really can't boil the ocean, I've sort of started thinking more about rather than data volume, data value, right? What are the high value data assets? And we don't know what we don't know, right? There could be sort of, that parameter, like a lot genealogy value that in hindsight was extremely valuable we didn't capture. But as you build up those experiences, having spent in the field, we sort of develop an intuition around what high value is. even though you cannot, we haven't done that analysis, right? So identifying that funnel through which we take the valuation of the data, capturing that data, making sure that you have established those data contracts and data standards, right, from the sources, and harmonizing it. So that sort of reduces the burden, right, technical burden of managing that data. Because remember, you can verify all you want, but you have to maintain it. So how do you build sustainable solutions? And to me, I'm sort of making the transition from being a data maximalist to more thinking about, let's think about high value, high impact data first, and then solve the long tail of verification of all data within our system. But I might change my opinion in a year or two, where if AI can make data verification easy and trivial at source, which I doubt it will do right away, yeah, absolutely, let's do it, right? But if you're resource leverage or resource constrained, start with the high value data.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think, when I think about this, I reason from first principles of having kind of built these systems. And we're currently in an age where, especially these kind of LLMs or generative models, as you call them, Aaron, they are exceptional at intelligence and reasoning. But right now they are heavily constrained by their memory and context. And so what this means is that when you inundate them with a lot of data that does not actually contain a signal on the thing that you care about, they start to break down. And this is especially true because they are based on this thing called attention as well, where when you have a signal, very kind of far to the left, and then another signal that's required very far to the right, their ability to connect those things breaks down. And so I would say it's extremely important that we collect data that is actually relevant to the thing we care about. And I think this is seen in this industry time and time again, when scientists basically think about, what assay should I use to get a signal on the biological outcome that I care about? And as a practical kind of point, I would say, even asking ChatGPT, what data is likely to contain signal or information on the thing I care about? And I think it's as simple as that to start off.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree here. I think there's not a right or wrong, but there's a lot of discussion or maybe media headlines around groups that just want large data sets. And I think internally in the community, there's discussion on the value of those large data sets beyond sort of the company that is actually generating them. And so when we were thinking about bringing AI in-house, before we started scaling, we were really careful to not claim the world, because I think a lot of people use this terminology of transformer models can take in all this data and you sort of wave a magic wand and all your data is analyzed. But what we really had to find was what, like you were saying, what assay that we perform actually improved the predictive measures that we were doing in-house. And that will change from company to company, but important to note that the context is key, and that there are always going to be different camps. Some camps believe eventually we'll have the ability to just sift through whatever data you generate to bring up the high value signal. But right now I'm definitely on the camp of, personally, a data maximalist, but from a company perspective, being pretty lean with your operations.
If I could, just on that point, Aaron, I think one big thing that's I don't think appreciated enough is that obviously being resource constrained, the quality to which we can generate this data, as you were talking about before, is not good. And I think this is evidenced by the massive crisis of irreproducibility of experiments. And so you can generate more data, but if you're just reinforcing batch effects or other structural issues, you're just further confusing these intelligent systems. And so I think there's an actual inherent structural problem that is not going to be overcome unless you actually overcome the data quality.
And as they say, right, correlation is not causation, right? And oftentimes these transformers, right, even the most sophisticated deep learning networks are basically finding patterns that are basic correlations. So throwing more data at it, even if it's sort of quality data, if it's irrelevant, all it's going to do is add to the noise of more patterns that you see. But if you don't have a biological prior, a mechanistic prior, or some sort of an intuition about what that data means, you're just going to get, it's not just garbage data in, it's garbage signal in, garbage signal out, right? So that's something that we have to sort of be mindful of.
Yeah, so we've talked about data, now about the tools. So you made the decision internally that you want to bring AI in or use AI, or you're given a directive that AI is a mandate. What are your opinions on, do you build an AI model in-house and sort of use the resources if you're not constrained, or do you work with someone else that has those capabilities? And give an example where you can along both those lines.
I mean, I would say it depends on what's your business model, really. And my understanding is biotechs want outcomes. And when I think about a modeling or an AI company, they want basically a process. And so I think one good example is Therapeutics, who make kind of targeted capsids, right? It's a platform technology. Their business model is based on being able to generate novel and kind of large-scale discoveries. And so having an engine to do that is very valuable for them, right? That is their core IP. But if your core IP is a small portfolio of therapeutics that you want to optimize the CQAs of, then building in-house AI kind of seems like a distraction to that.
Now, this is a question that, as decision makers within an organization, we always struggle with, especially again in small companies versus larger companies where the mandate is slightly different, the resource availability is slightly different, your time horizons are different. In a smaller company where we are looking to get to the decisions quickly, right? So the way we think about it is, right, like I have a personal sort of 2x2 sort of framework, if you will, right? On one axis is risk, right? Whether it's a regulatory risk, compliance risk, time risk, and on the other axis is scale, right? Are we talking about something that will serve 10 users or versus 10,000 users? So I feel like if you're on the bottom left, right, if you're on low risk and low scale, I feel like the pendulum is towards building, right? And especially with agentic AI and coding and Cursor and Claude Code, I feel like that pendulum is swinging more in that direction, that if you have even a couple of people in your team who are very versatile and conversant with these tools, you can build a lot. But again, you have to be mindful of the application that, again, if it's within the research domain, right, low risk of any regulatory issues, right, or compliance issues, you're fine. Now, as you sort of start moving, adopting more risk profile, right, whether it's now this is data that you have to defend at some point or package in a BLA filing or an IND, then you have to think carefully about, okay, is this something that we can build, maintain, and sustain through the period, right? And is this something that your team can handle internally, right? And if not, then sort of that pendulum starts shifting towards like, let's invest in something that is low cost, a solution, partner with somebody, come up with creative partnerships so that you don't have to pay the full licensing fee upfront and so on. The other axis is scale. That's sort of self-explanatory, right? It's easy enough to build tools that can serve 10 or 20 users, 100 users. We are talking about 1,000 users, right? It's a different ballgame. Even with all the coding tools that you have, understanding the design patterns, the data architectures, setting up data differently, optimizing for transactional data versus analytical data. That's where you probably need the professionals, and that's where, at the very least, you may not want to buy, but maybe outsource it to a solutions architecture firm or folks that are professionals who can build it for you. So that's the way how I think about build versus buy.
Yeah, and where do you think the gap here is for adoption? Across, is it a cultural problem within companies? And whose responsibility is it to apply these tools beyond, say, I think there are a lot of people maybe in the crowd that have gotten the mandates from their boards or questions around how are you using AI? If you are a scientist or a manager of a group, like where do you begin? Is it with the tool? Do you have a cultural shift on adoption of this sort of new language and terminology in the field? Where do you start?
I think obviously in biotech, there are kind of structural things that matter a lot more than other kind of tech places. So this idea that one needs to kind of be a little bit thoughtful before jumping in, I think is very valid, right? And I think on the regulatory side of things, making sure your data is safe is a very important aspect, especially as these kind of large AI kind of labs start to talk about taking IP share, which has come out in the past kind of few weeks from OpenAI. So these are very, very important. But there are so many ways to basically, have generalized kind of agent workflows or just getting rid of the menial tasks. I don't think it needs to be this, we're going to train our own foundation model in-house and start discovering proteins. I think it's, let's get kind of meeting transcriptions being put into our databases to get rid of all of the busy knowledge work. I think it's, kind of small steps.
Yeah, we've certainly heard the siren song of AI, right? Like, how are you doing AI? Are we doing AI? How can we do more AI, right? And, it's a fair question, right? Because you cannot ignore the reality that this is where we are heading, right? Especially the tech sector has been heavily impacted with the SaaS sell-off from last week. So the way I've been thinking about it is, right, not to push back and say we don't need to do it or we need to do more of it. I think it's sort of reframing the question as, if you want to sort of put it on a sort of a leverage chart, right? Where are we investing in AI? Where are the strategic bets that we can place in AI, right? You can have at the bottom of that pyramid, if you will, AI that allows for better tooling and speed, right? How can we leverage that into better project decisions, program decisions, portfolio decisions, and finally organizational impact? So I've been sort of trying to communicate that and work with our leadership to say, okay, here's where our bets have been in AI, right? And here's we need to be, right? We can't just take bets at the bottom of the pyramid, because then organizationally we won't be moving the ball. How do we sort of spread it out? And I think that sort of reframes the question around, are we doing AI to think about how do we do, what do we leave on the table and where do we invest in? Because we can't do it all, right, as a small company as well. But it's a great question. It will continue. That's a discussion that I expect to have continually, right? This is a wild ride that we are in for. And I mean, honestly, next year, this time, I expect to have many more panels here at Advanced Therapeutics Week around AI. So.
Yeah, I kind of see it as it's muscle memory. It's a muscle you really have to build, and I use it a lot, but I've been using it for several years as it's evolved. And so, within KiraGen, I think we sort of have during our weekly meetings, we actually talk about one way we've leveraged an AI tool. So it doesn't have to be AI broadly, but people get used to, asking ChatGPT a question about how they could maybe improve a slide, or getting to the point where some of these tools can be built for you to help guide experimental design, but they can be used today. And I don't think a lot of people realize, as they get smarter over time, you can be using these sort of generative AI tools that don't really have to know a ton of context to help guide everybody. And so my vision is that it's everyone from executives all the way down that has sort of this assistant with them to guide them throughout their journey. So really democratization of that access, where you can have a PhD level scientist for every employee to really be able to take the sort of menial tasks off the board for everybody within an organization and hopefully do more with their time. I think the one thing I wanted to get maybe on from the flip side, let's say there's someone that isn't a decision maker in the room that wants to implement AI, but needs to make the business case, to their managers or higher ups. Where would you suggest starting, whether you're from a large pharma or not? Where do you suggest starting and showing that sort of ROI, if you let me say, to get the buy-in for implementing more in-house?
So going back to my sort of the framing of the the impact, right? Impact layers, right? So there are multiple levels, right? And you can think of it like AI for accelerating, productivity. So whether that's enterprise-wide productivity, which is summarizing documents, writing emails, having chatbots with PDFs, right, for research, insight generation, doing deep research, and so on. That's a sort of a foundational layer which sort of rises all boats, right, across the organization. Now, that you can consider it as an acceleration strategy without a direct connection to a particular program or a corporate goal, right? But that's very important, because that's how you consider that as a foundation. You are increasing AI literacy and adoption across the organization broadly without really tying it to a specific ROI in at least on the early phase. Now, obviously, you can add in KPIs and you can say that, okay, X% of a company is now using AI tools. They have been trained on the safe and ethical use of AI, so that our data, we're not leaking our data out there. So that's important, because that's going to sort of then enable the next sort of phase, which is accelerating scientific and clinical insights, right? How do we then use these tools? And this is, again, if this is the framing that decision makers, it will resonate with them, right? That AI allows us to cut down cost of our target ID or drug discovery program by 20%, right? So that is a framing that really you can assign an ROI, right? Clinical insights. I think we can write this IND in a week instead of working with a medical writer for 3 weeks. I mean, those are the discussions. I'm not saying, I'm not quoting exact numbers, right? But that's the ROI for specific projects that decision makers understand. And then the next level is sort of the broader portfolio strategy, right? Are we can we leverage AI to look at competitive intelligence for business development, and how we can have the right combination of projects and programs and the right investments, and how can AI enable that? That's again a next level of abstraction that you have to discuss with decision makers. So it's a process, right? You have to build the foundations, raise the AI literacy, and then think about specific ROIs on specific projects.
I mean, I can only give perspective on the kind of startup side of things, which is, I think, a lot less laden with many kind of layers of decision making and checking off. But what I've found both at Ptolemy and previous places is that when you can find a high leverage kind of application, like you were saying, the ability to demonstrate how kind of amazing using these tools are for them, it has seemingly been enough to convince pretty much kind of whole small teams in the company. And I think some examples are, we have our Slack or our Teams, we have a kind of an AI bot that's able to just weigh in on particular questions and search the literature or search kind of the latest news and provide context just like that. And someone sees that just in the kind of Slack channel and they're like, this is incredible. Like, I can immediately see where the utility is. And, in other examples, even kind of the scientific discovery process at Ptolemy, we've run experiments previously where it's been quite manual, and we've kind of, taken weeks to kind of design and execute. Being able to just take the relevant context and ask these models, hey, what would you do? And have them replicate is incredible. It's actually astounding how capable these things are now. And I would say demonstrating, like we do in science, with case studies, essentially, is the fastest way to convince.
I mean, I completely agree. So, I mean, I've been in the industry long enough to see the big data revolution and the cloud computing revolution, and it felt like, while it created a huge impact within a narrow vertical of IT and data management, it never really sort of resonated with the business, right? Because for them, it was still an abstraction, right? Like, okay, this is about something about data and compute and cloud compute and an efficiency play. But when, right, someone very senior opens up ChatGPT, asks a question, and magic happens, right? I sort of, I guess it's the same feeling that people had when they first saw an iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. And were able to navigate it. You didn't need to teach how to use an iPhone. You just saw the apps, you click, you can do stuff. Yeah. And having these tools, right, that lowers the barrier of adoption so much that you almost have to be reactionary to not use these tools, right? I mean, and it's impossible not to use these tools. So that has really created a level of familiarity and intimacy with these AI tools with the decision-making bodies, even if they're averse to code and don't want to do it with any tool, or they don't consider themselves as someone who's technologically savvy, they still can use it, right? And that's the difference this time.
Yeah, and maybe transitioning now a bit more in the predictive section for the future, it would have been impossible to predict what you could accomplish over the last year. I don't think anybody really had any idea how fast it was going. And I think the sort of pace has also changed from the transition of, we hear about the small molecule biologics, to now things actually in cell and gene therapy for mRNA sequence optimization, whatever it might be. For, let's throw our bets out there, which are impossible. For 2026, what is sort of the one very cell and gene therapy specific application that maybe is not ready today, but we'll see over the next year really being applied to move the needle forward?
I would say just the kind of one that I can speak to that I think will really come to light at the end of the year and kind of going on is this idea of being able to utilize probably machine learning approaches to detect deviation and kind of have AI applied to CMC. I think this is one of the most scoped applications. It's one of the safest and kind of most realizable, I think. And I'm sure there could be many, but as you say, this day and age is very hard to predict.
Well, since you asked for a pretty narrow time frame of 1 year, which it's not a lot of time, I'm going to say that a lot of it is going to be getting, sort of elevating the grunt work of, managing paper records, right? Whether they're batch records, digitizing them and interacting with them, whether it's protocols, whether it's drafting protocols or reading protocols, right? For example, the FDA CRL database, I'm sure others have done this as well. But you can just take all the 200 plus documents, CRL documents from the database, throw it into Notebook LM, and then have your internal knowledge base, which you can interrogate, right? And this is something that you set it up once, you update it with new documents every week, and now you have a very powerful resource which required zero coding, zero development, and $0 to build up. So there will be applications around this, around document reviews, document summarization, document drafting, which I think will have a tremendous impact over the course of a year. Longer term, right, I agree with you, machine learning for predictive analytics, for process development, for target ID, all the things that I talked about earlier will have an impact, but that's going to be a bit jagged, right? It's going to be a bit uneven, it's context dependent, right? But I think this sort of managing data and documents and interacting with them will fundamentally change over the next year or so.
I think just to emphasize your point as well, the FDA, I'm pretty sure, released towards the end of last year the fact that they are using a kind of internal AI tool for document management and summarization of compliance and regulatory called ELSA, and that they already have 70% adoption across the workforce. So as a precipitator, I think you're right, it's quite clear.
Yeah, I definitely see, maybe I'm going against my recommendation of cell and gene therapy specific ones, but I think you'll see a transition from these sort of all AI native, where maybe their differentiation is their model and how they're applying it, to just broad adoption of different tools across the whole industry. So maybe you aren't an AI native company, but you have started making that transition. I do think within the field, there has been a bit of hesitation of those are the only ones that should be really using it because that's their bread and butter. But I really do think the whole field is going to start adopting it if they have not already. And I think everyone in the data side would say they've already been using it for a long time. You just don't know the terms.
No, but I think what you're, it's an important point, right? You can either, lead in AI, right, and be the trendsetter, and the tech bio companies, right? They have a proprietary foundation model, right? This is one data set that they've accumulated over, course of years of spending a lot of money, and now this is the model that they have developed, where they can monetize it, they can interact NVIDIA as partners, and they can use it as a factory for drug development, right? Or you can fast follow, right? You don't have to lead and you develop the best-in-class model, but you can adopt, foundation models, protein language models, AlphaFold 3. You can use single-cell GPT, SCGPT models, right? These are all open source. AlphaFold is not open source, but CollabFold and OpenFold 3 are, right? So you can fast follow and you can keep up with the latest technology out there, again, for free, right? Because they are open source. You can literally use agentic AI to build a wrapper around the foundation model, right? And that's something that anyone can do and should do, right? If you don't do the fast follow, you do risk being left behind a little bit. And I can't quantify that risk. I think it depends on the individual company, but I think every company can lean forward and at least fast follow and be half a step behind the leaders in the field.
Maybe we'll end here with one question before we open up for questions from the audience. I think there's a lot of discussion we've talked about already around agentic AI, or AI that can kind of do things for you. Maybe same question around, maybe not over the next year, but where do you see, for cell and gene therapy specific applications, where something like this agentic AI can actually, is capable within the next, say, year or two of doing for us? Like what is a really grounded example for everyone in the audience to think about?
Maybe I can start with a small example, right? So I'm sure everyone's heard of Claude, which is an Anthropic product, and they released something called Claude Scientific Skills, which is sub-agents or patterns that Claude can use to interrogate different scientific tools or leverage different tools. So unlike an Oracle LLM like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, these are hyper-specialized, almost scientifically trained agents that can do one thing very well. For example, it can interrogate a genetic database, or it can interrogate a protein structure database very well. And there are lots of these skills available. And what you could do now is you can, again, with a very basic $20 per month subscription, or even free, I would say, you can load these skills and you can ask a question, hey, I'm interested in all the small molecules that have been ever screened against a particular target, go find them in patent literature on ChemDB or other databases, find their IC50s, do this analysis, and produce a report. Or go find, search the patent literature for all the binders, CAR binders, SCFE binders that have been ever designed against a particular antigen, find the data about them, get the sequence, and do some basic analysis, alignment analysis. An agent with that can do that, and I've done this, and so within 10 minutes, what someone like a bioinformatician would take a few hours, spread out over a few days perhaps, now you can turn that around in a few minutes. And in terms of token costs, 50 cents per, give or take of money. This is what agentic AI can do now. This is off the shelf. And imagine what you can do if you invest in that technology, bespoke for your own company's needs, and build this swarm of agents or co-scientists that every scientist in your team has. I can't even imagine the possibilities at this stage. So it's pretty thrilling, scary, terrifying. I'm glad I'm along for the ride. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of bet a company around this idea, but we've already seen, even kind of with deployments to people that we have already, that they're able to literally upload data that's been sitting around for months in a few minutes, and as you said, basically generate what are the 3 best experiments I could run tomorrow to give me the most information on improving this phenotype or that critical quality attribute. And as you say, it's terrifying how even now how possible this is. In a year's time, I imagine that similar to what's happened in software, and I've been a software engineer for probably 10 years, I no longer write a single line of code. It is incredible, and I think a very similar thing will happen in science, where the scientist becomes the kind of orchestrator and the visionary, but the kind of experimental design is not done by us. It is maximized for information for every question.
Great. Well, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes for questions. If there are any burning ones from the audience, happy to. Bueller. Sorry. And if there aren't any questions, I think we are at the end of our session and don't want to stop you from this and the Petco Park celebration. So I want to thank my fellow panelists here, and happy to chat offline. But looking forward to seeing you all throughout the rest of the conference. Thanks.